Welcome back to OST, On Second Thought, where we revisit hands that were played on Poker Out Loud. Today we have a hand directly after I stacked Berkey with Jack 9. Remember that?
I do.
Where I have 10s under the gun, and we have another pot developing.
So this is going back again to episode 4 of Poker Out Loud.
There was a bit of a lull in distribution on 5 and 6. Not a lot going on. So we chose to go back to episode 4 for this one.
I like that.
Where I have an interesting spot, as do you. So I opened 10s under the gun to 40, just because I don't think anyone's going to really notice that I went 40 instead of 35 or 30.
Yeah.
And you decide to 3-bet me from the hijack with King 8 suited. Let's hear your thoughts.
Okay. Deck kind of has a funny way of doing this. Gives you a thin spot to take immediately after playing a very big pot, drawing dead. Yeah, this is a situation where I don't think I can really pass on this 3-bet. It's thin, and the meta that is going to form is probably going to be negative for me, and that's a good reason to just like let this hand go. But we are on a fixed time, and you know, they're still going to have to respond. So I'm actually going to choose to size up quite a bit here, particularly after you open to 40 instead of 30. I'm going to go 190.
190?
Do you stand by your 3-bet?
It's loose, but in this particular environment, I think that it's okay to take spots as they may fall. I think that this might be...
What do you mean by this environment?
Well, one in which I've taught you guys the strategy. It's like, it should be assumed that I have a bit of a leg up in where the deviations and nooks and crannies are throughout.
Sure.
And I also think that, you know, there's just a tendency in live poker to project certain expectations onto players. So whatever your image of me may be, I think that I can kind of utilize that in my favor. Now, to your credit, I would say that like you didn't really let the meta get too involved in your decision-making process throughout the course of this entire hand, which I think is really good.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, at equilibrium, when we ran the solve, King 9 suited gets 3-bet here at a small percentage, about 20% of the time.
I like King 8 better.
Why?
Most of the properties also apply to King 9. I think it's just like a little bit too good.
But you're not going to flat it.
No. I mean, like King 8 really naturally shifts to checks on like pairs. When it has pairs, it wins a showdown sometimes.
Yeah, I just think the same holds true with King 9.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing to say that like
King
you
9
prefer...
makes straights. 10, Jack, Queen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas King 8 doesn't have that value.
Right, but you're not going to flat call with King 9 suited, so what's the difference? It seems like being able to make straights is a good quality.
Well, not here in this specific spot, but just in general, I mean, like as a
right.
3-bet.
Yeah, but we're talking about this specific spot because as we go further,
true.
As we get later into position, you'll 3-bet them both. And
Sure.
you'll flat them both at, you know, some small frequency. Or you can. Let's put it that way.
You do 3-bet though.
Yeah. It's aggressive. And honestly, I think like with the meta being what it was, I kind of just wanted to see how that would play out in the environment. Because I think in real game, in a real-time scenario, I would do the exact opposite.
The hand I played at the first Elite Academy I went to, so 2 years ago, with Jai, taught me a lot about the meta, like not getting swept up.
I don't recall.
He opens 9s EP. I call. Flops like 8, 6. No, like 3 low cards with a flush draw, but it wasn't all connected. So it was like a gap.
Okay.
3 low cards. I have 8s.
Okay.
He bets. I raise. He 3-bets, and I shove. He calls.
So you just have an overpair. He has an overpair.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I mean, it's a deviation, right? Like it's not standard to open like or raise the flop versus uncapped range. I just got like sort of swept up in.
He's just
Jordan.
too wide. Yeah. Which is true, and it could justify a raise.
It's everything that happens thereafter.
Right. It's like when I'm caught in the deviation, I just have to fold.
Yeah, exactly.
But
so yeah, like I think in a real world scenario, I would tend to try to have it if I were going to 3-bet immediately after getting stacked.
yeah,
Like if you're going to try to fake tilt, you don't actually want to have a hand that would fall into the realm of quote unquote tilt.
I just don't really think like you're tilting though.
No, but my sizing's egregious. Like I'm at bottom taking actions that align with being at bottom.
Sure.
But I also think that like you're a thinking player and may try to see through that and be like, oh, well, he would never tilt this spot.
I just don't think you like tilt regardless.
I'm not, but I'm trying to represent tilt in a learning environment. Like,
oh, I see.
I'm at bottom of range
for the sake of
yeah,
the product.
Like I just wanted to see how the response would work out.
Yeah.
It's like I'm at bottom of range. I'm up against somebody who, you know, had an emotional investment in the previous hand and is riding high kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm taking actions that are aligning with bottom of range where it's like I'm really trying hard to work a fold.
Simulated tilt.
Kind of, yeah. And it's also a challenge for myself of like, can I navigate this realm with a clear head when I'm actually not tilted?
Yeah.
So we get to kind of play a fun spot.
So I have a pretty standard call, and I identify that. I'm happy with my analysis.
Yep. Do you think if I were way out of line, do you think that you could potentially shift into a 4-bet here?
I would rather not. Just have to be forced to make a decision whether to stack off for 300 big blinds with 10s or not.
Yeah. I think that there are situations where stacking off 300 big blinds with 10s is okay, but it's pretty whaley.
It's like when I'm wrong, it's really, really expensive. And when I'm right, you could just have like ace jack suited and it's a flip anyway.
Yeah, that's kind of the pain of it all.
Seems like asymmetrical reward to me.
Yeah, unless you start to see hands that you dominate in my like potential bluff shove range. Right, so like when the ace 5 suiteds are in there, when the suited connectors are in there, when the smaller pairs are in there,
yeah,
stuff like that.
I guess I also just it just seems like unnecessary.
I'm not saying it's good against me. I'm just saying there are definitely spots for it.
Yeah,
I can remember the first time, and granted this was a long time ago, but when I made the leap from 510 uncapped to 1020 at Bellagio, I used to like sit with an amount I was comfortable with, despite thinking I was a really good player. And I remember like a couple of those.
Does that mean more or less?
Less.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big jump at that point. And I remember like, a lot of the players being like, I would never sit not covering the entire table, you know, just dick swinging.
Yeah.
And I had that mentality, but there was still part of me that was honest enough with myself where it was like,
What'd you sit with?
250 bigs. Because my mind,
5K?
Yeah. So in my mind,
That's a lot.
Yeah, but in my mind, it was like, how much am I willing to sit with and still stack off with jacks?
Yeah.
And that was just the exact way I thought about it. And I can remember a particular situation where I got it in with 10s from the small blind versus the button in a scenario where like it seemed really thin, but he ended up having like something really bad, like 7s or 6s, something like that. He was just a wreck player. And it was one of those situations where I was like, I'm glad I wasn't deeper.
How much did you have when you first started playing?
Bankroll?
Yeah.
Oh man, like 50.
Wow.
At my peak, probably.
Damn, you stacking out for 10% of the roll with fucking 10.
I didn't even think that way back then. It wasn't even like a question. Like you found the soft games in town and you played. Okay. Anyway, moving forward.
So 2, 4, 7.
Yep.
2 of hearts, 4 hearts, 7 of clubs. I have a pretty standard check. You have the aggression. And you mull over a size or a better check.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here I'm going to flop no pair, no draw. I do have reasonable backdoor equity that isn't particularly going to fall favorably for me. So if I do peel a 5 or a 6 on the turn, that's not necessarily going to be a great equity distribution for my range. It'll be good for my particular hand, but Chris is going to have a lot of coverage on those cards. He'll have some suited connectors. This flop is a relatively low checking frequency in a 3-bet pot. None of my overpairs really want to be checking back. Neither do most of my unmade hands. I think a lot of my checkbacks here would contain hearts, or at least a heart. Some of my ace highs with a heart would want to start checking back. I'm pretty resigned to just betting here, I believe. The issue that we run into is that he'll have a lot of available check raises, particularly when I block none of them, and this hand just falls off very quickly. That's not necessarily the reason to not pull the trigger. It's just kind of falling into this, it gives him a simple counter, effectively is what I'm saying. And he just gets to play his hand according to his hand's equity. I don't necessarily know that I deny a whole lot of hands. So I'm basically just contemplating between checking back versus choosing a relatively small size and forcing him to pull triggers. The third option would be diving into the meta a little bit, where I maybe start with an overbet and just put him in a situation where his bluff catchers feel very uncomfortable and he has to decipher if I'm like quote unquote actually tilting or if I just have a good hand to blow the pot up with. I'm kind of liking that option the best because I'm pretty indifferent between checking back and betting small. So I'm gonna lean into it a little bit. I think I'm gonna go 350 here on the flop with the intention of checking back pretty much all turns, king/8 included.
Anyway, you choose a polar size, which we can go back and examine in a bit as we bring in the solver.
Yep.
I don't really have a choice here. Standard call. You still retain all the overpairs, obviously.
What do you think of my choice in size?
I mean, I would expect you to be going bigger on disadvantaged textures, but I think this is an advantage texture.
So I think that holds true in single raise pots, not so much in 3-bet pots, especially when I 3-bet to 5x your open.
You don't think you have advantage on this texture?
Yeah, I definitely have advantage. But my point is that there's no desire to keep ranges wide when ranges are already so narrow. So essentially, I'm just pressing my uncappedness onto your cappedness. Just the simple fact that I retain aces, kings, and queens.
So that incentivizes a bigger size.
Yeah, largely. What it allows me to do is just take my highest EV hands, bet really large.
I think I respond pretty well to a bigger bet. Like, I think I probably just call my high equity and fold the rest. Like, I don't know if I call fives here.
Well, we can examine whether or not that's a mistake.
Right.
I would imagine that your instincts are correct, but you're probably slightly overfolding, if I had to guess.
Yeah. I mean, in hindsight, I think it makes sense.
I think what it's ultimately going to lead to is your best bluff catchers on the flop are going to feel really uncomfortable by river.
Yeah.
And that's really problematic because now essentially when you land yourself to the point of leverage,
right,
you're going to need top of range to stack off.
I mean, what are your barrels? Because in your analysis, you say when you're choosing a size on the flop, you say like a 5 and a 6. You can't really barrel because
Right.
I've covered it on those cards.
Right.
So how much merit does the point that my best bluff catchers are going to be uncomfortable by the river have if you're not barreling?
Well, I will be barrel. 5 and a 6 isn't like the majority of turns.
Oh, so you're what turns are you barreling?
All non-heart 8. Oh, not an 8. Probably all non-heart 9 plus.
King?
King, I would change my sizing on, I think.
You would go big, small?
Yeah, I think I would be forced to. King and probably an ace.
I don't think the solver would like that. I'd be interesting. It'd probably just check a king, right? It won't
We'll
go,
see.
It won't go big, small.
I
But
mean,
anyway,
we'll see. But even if
Yeah.
it wouldn't, it's just an exploitative play because your range becomes pretty transparent by the time we land on the turn. The reason why I would want to check is because you would, at equilibrium, be calling with some king X, be calling with some ace X on flop.
Yeah.
So therefore, I would be dominated whenever I land on that turn
Right.
card with king 8.
Feels like a natural.
And you would
very
also
natural
have
check.
and you would also have like enough sets in your range that betting there would just probably become negative EV.
Right. I call the flop. Pretty standard.
Yep.
8 of hearts. Equities shift dramatically. What are your... I decided to check, like, without much analysis, but I think it deserves a bit. Like,
Deserves a bet?
a bit of analysis.
Oh, yeah. I
Like
agree.
what I'm leading.
Right.
What do you think appropriate leads would be on this card?
I'm sure you'll have some at equilibrium, but I don't think they're all that intuitive. Like nines feels like it could potentially block, but I'm not really sure. So that's kind of the issue, is that top of range has no real incentive to lead here. I don't think. And
So I'm not leading my flushes.
I mean, you could lead. You certainly could lead some of your nut flushes that unblock me cooling or being cooled off. So like maybe like if you have like ace deuce of hearts,
I
leading
hand
something
like
that.
Jack 10 of hearts. I think would be pretty torchy as a lead.
Agreed. That's why I'm saying like it should really only be like nut flushes,
Yeah.
or cards that somehow block the nuts. That's gonna be hard to come by though, because
Yeah, we don't really have many hands.
I guess
king,
like if
queen.
we see that we're supposed to be peeling like ace king with one heart,
Yeah.
but I doubt that's the case.
Right.
I imagine it's gonna be most of your suited varieties that are gonna peel.
It's gonna be like one combo at most too, because it's like I 4-bet a lot.
Yeah. So maybe I guess it would be exactly ace queen with the ace of hearts.
So not many available.
I mean, we could manufacture them, but they're not
Yeah.
going to be intuitive, I guess is my point.
So I check the tens over to you. No heart. I do not have a heart. You also check after some analysis. 8 of diamonds.
What would have been
Cool.
your response to 3/4 pot bet on turn?
On the turn. I just fold.
Yeah.
I would just fold.
Yeah. I think that's probably.
I was assuming once you pulled the flop that you had like overpairs and equity hands. And even like your logical barrels, I have poor equity against. Like ace of hearts, queen, ace of hearts, jack, ace of hearts, king. Those hands have a lot of equity against me anyway.
Yeah, it just sucks because if
And like
that's true, then I'm probably going to get to overbluff that spot because I'm going to have so many combinations.
yeah, but with what?
Well, if I have all the offsuit ace jack plus, that's 3 combos of
Yeah, but
each.
you're just gonna take ace of diamonds, jack of spades, and just bet again.
No. But all the ones that contain the ace of hearts or potentially even the kicker of hearts. So like,
I don't think it's like a massive problem if you say you have like ace of hearts, jack, ace of hearts, queen, ace of hearts, king in full, which I think is pretty reasonable.
yeah.
12, 9, no 9
Yeah.
combos. 9 combos that all have good equity against me, and then the rest I'm losing to already.
Right, but I could also just be betting the inverse of those. Ace X with the queen of hearts, ace X with the jack of hearts, ace
Really?
X with the king. Well, yeah, because I'm blocking you from having a lot of those nut flush draw combinations now too.
Yeah,
You don't
Sure.
have ace queen of hearts, you don't have ace jack of hearts, you don't have ace king of hearts.
Mhm.
You know, so
I think it'd be much more difficult.
you also
if-
don't have like the other way, like king queen of hearts or queen jack of hearts or king jack of hearts.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be much more difficult if you bet smaller on the flop, and then bet the turn again.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think my turn size would matter to the
Yeah.
sensitivity of your hand. But yeah, I mean, even still, you'll just have tens with the heart to call.
Yeah, I'd probably still fold on the turn.
Tens with a heart?
No, no.
Right.
But
Okay.
I would still fold.
Yeah.
Turn. 8 of diamonds. What a life. You got me back.
Felt good.
Suck out for suck out.
Feels good, man. Feels real good.
I check again. I consider a block. Let's hear my analysis.
Good.
I was just expecting a massive bet from Berkey there. Given that he pulled the flop, I would assume that he has a lot of heart combinations, as well as overpairs. And I still can't really lead into that range. I could potentially block, given that I have heart combinations as well, but I don't really want to give him the opportunity to raise with any potential candidates that he may have. I think he might see through a block bet. Let's start with a check.
So I basically arrive at the conclusion that you have a polar range. I have, given the action, sort of a middling hand.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense to lead into a polar range.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that you could gain from it is you could shut down some of my bluffs potentially. But now you just like lose all the EV of betting.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not going to really have like sixes here to call you with or ace high.
Yeah.
Very often.
My value target seems non-existent.
Yeah. The thing is, though, that you do kind of have flushes, which should prevent me from raising a lot of my one pair hands.
Yeah, but I still lose to those.
I understand. No, I get it. But like, I even think that if you block there, I could take some of my better one pair hands and still potentially try to eke out value. Because to me, yes, you do have some flushes, but not a ton. And it just seems like you have a lot of middle pairs.
Yeah, I mean, the only way I see me winning with a block bet is when you just muck a worse hand.
Yeah, right.
So
It's basically a way to take the best hand to showdown cheaper.
Yeah, but for what?
Right.
You know? So I check, and you think for a long time about a size.
Okay, it's nice when a plan comes together. Chris chose not to bet here. This still could be relatively condensed of traps. He doesn't really have a ton of available bluffs here on the river, given my flop sizing was very large. He would have to be turning a lot of pairs into bluffs, so hands like 9s, 10s, maybe as big as jacks, or a hand like ace-7 suited into bluffs. He'd prefer to have a heart whenever he does that, so ace-7 suited is pretty much ruled out. No shock to see him check here. He easily could have like ace-3 of clubs, ace-5 of clubs, but those hands are just giving up. Instead, I need to look at his showdown-driven range and really define the target that I'm going after, as well as how much of that can check raise, both as bluffs and value. So I landed on the river with pretty much the strongest hand that I could possibly have here. When I check back turn, I'm mostly going to be comprised of overpairs that have the potential to improve to the nuts, as strong as like aces with the ace of hearts. I will have some ace-king with the ace of hearts, but probably unlikely given the line work through which I've worked so far. 8-7 will probably be my only full house here, and I will have it in exactly one combo. I'll have 8-7 of spades. I may have some other combos of trip 8s, such as 8-9 of clubs, but very, very few. So I have a mandatory bet here, that's clear. It's more so like, what am I targeting? And I think it's that range of 9s through whatever the biggest pocket pair is that he would slow play. I also want to bet a size where flush feels a little bit uncomfortable check raising me, in spite of the fact that I don't have a lot of full houses. I can check back a set of 7s, 4s, or 2s some of the time for deception, but I probably don't have 4s or 2s all that often. So really it's like, what hands does he land on river with that possess the ace of hearts that would allow him to bluff? And it's mostly just going to be like ace queen, ace king with the ace of hearts. I think only exactly those, which there are going to be 6 combinations total of. So at most he'll have like 6 logical bluffs available to him. He could turn a 7 into a bluff repping a set, but I think that's not necessarily that probable. That said though, I think he can only really check raise the nut flush, and he'll probably only have 6 or 7, maybe 8 combinations of that. So I'm gonna go for a 2/3 pot bet and very likely fold to a shove. I just don't think I'm being bluffed here very often. And I think if I go smaller, most of his check calling range is pretty inelastic, and it'll be a more opportunistic chance for him to try to blow me off of like black kings, especially given how the board played out. So I'm gonna go for 900, presenting nearly no fold equity, but I will be planning on folding to a shove, as I don't think he can profitably bluff this spot.
900.
So it's pretty hard for me to find available bluffs. I think all of those largely continue on the turn. I think it's entirely possible for him to still have plenty of heart combinations. I don't have the 10 of hearts. I have a pretty bad bluff catcher myself. I could still have flushes and one house and maybe two houses. I fall pretty low in my range, and it's pretty hard for me to find any logical bluffs from Berkey here, and I lose to all value. So unless he gives me something as I'm trying to fold here, I'm probably just gonna let it go.
You land on an accidental 900, I think, right?
Yeah. Big mistake. I wish I would have bet 6 because your response to that to me is more interesting. So I think this is the most interesting part of the hand, actually, in the sense that you have a very clear
Agreed.
bluff catcher.
Yeah.
And facing the size that I put out, you have a very clear fold. You just can't really call pot with tens no heart.
I was just having a really hard time. I mean, I sort of abandoned where I felt like I was in my range. That's part of my decision, but most of it was just that I thought it would be really, really hard for you to find bluffs in this line.
I think I could take this line with the naked ace of hearts, but
How do you check a heart on the turn?
because it's the 8 specifically, I think it just interacts with your range a lot. And I would have to start sizing down with my bluffs on the turn because my flushes aren't going to want to like pull out here. I have so many. Because think of it this way: if I strictly pull out, where I bet the naked ace of hearts, no pair,
Yeah.
and my flushes, my middling flushes can't fit in that bucket. So I'm only going to have so many nut flushes.
So does that mean you have to check? If you were to construct that way,
It would force me now not only to
check.
well, one of two things. I would either need two sizes, where
It wouldn't allow that though, right?
Sure.
If you bet smaller with your middling flushes and then
no, it certainly will because I'll be able to also
But we
put
pulled the
aces.
flop.
I'll also be able to put aces with the ace of hearts in that range.
so that's your protection.
Effectively.
Yeah.
And you're just gonna have hands that can bluff catch. So it's not like you'll be looking at 2 tens with a 10 of hearts and see a smaller size and
Yeah.
suddenly be like, oh, he's capped at queen jack of hearts. I'm going off here.
Yeah, I mean it's just sort of like my own interesting theoretical like nerd solver thing, not actually practical that somebody's gonna realize you're capped at a queen high flush.
No. I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying that like strategies aren't constricted by previous action. They're manipulated by previous action. So the hands that it will choose to fit into each of these sizes that we give it the option for, and the frequency at which it will take each size, will definitely be manipulated by the large size that I chose on the flop. That doesn't mean it will just eliminate them altogether. If we gave a middling size and a large size, there'll be bets for both, and there might be like some nut hands in both, and there might be some like bluffs in both.
Going large and then smaller is just like contrary to all my theoretical instincts.
But it's you're simplifying too much. When textures dramatically change, that just tends to be the nature of the beast. So a good example of this is if you remember the Wayback Machine, the hand that Polk played against me when I bombed the flop with Ace King on Ace 7-7.
When he had 8-9.
Yeah. So
Haven't talked about Magnus Carlsen yet
probably
on this. He's obviously like far and away the best chess player ever, and his whole strategy is taking people away from the studied
Oh
areas.
yeah.
He just corners people into parts of the tree they haven't studied.
Right. And this is a good example of that. So Polk's hand is a low frequency play, whatever. It probably wouldn't really even be made at all due to the nature of me polarizing my hand on the flop. But in any case, whenever he lands on the running nines and the board now double pairs, it drastically changes the way that it wants to construct river bet sizes.
Yeah. Well, my hiccup is advantage flop, big bet, equity shift to me on the turn.
We'll say a little bit more neutral, but sure.
A little more.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
but you definitely don't like increase your equity.
No.
And the
I
size
agree,
goes down.
Right. But that's intuitive.
Turn favors me. You should be sizing bigger.
Well, the turn doesn't favor you enough.
We
We can look, but I imagine I still have EV advantage on turn.
Anyway, I'm facing 900 on the river.
Yeah.
And I basically just land on a fold because, one, I think I still have I know I still have flushes.
Yeah.
And also, I just can't find hands that I beat.
Yeah. I think that's
So I just
fair.
fold.
I thought in real time that, and I think I say this in my analysis, that, or maybe in the interview thereafter, that you were being short-sighted saying that you couldn't find enough bluffs, especially if I'm over 3-betting the spot. So if I'm 3-betting a lot of offsuit combinations of hands, particular broadways, I'm just going to land on the river with too many hands.
Like what hands?
King, queen off.
King, queen, no heart?
No, with a heart. I don't always
Doesn't follow through on the turn?
Well, the 8 is very particular. I don't think that I'm always just going to be pulling that trigger again, because I think that with the way the pot's being constructed, I can't go pull.
Let me ask you this. If it was 2, 4, 7, 10 of hearts, 10 of diamonds.
Yeah.
I mean, that's different because let's say I just have like 9s now as a bluff catcher.
Yeah.
Then through the bet line, you can't have any bluffs.
I think it would be a lot harder for me to have bluffs.
Okay.
Well, maybe not on the 10-10, but like if it's
that's
like
a lot
Jack,
of discipline, man, to check the 8 of hearts, but bet the 10 of hearts.
But that's what we're trained to do.
Yeah. You get the ace of hearts.
Yeah, I mean it's just, but there's gonna be a lot of other hands, and then also I'm gonna have hands that could potentially be turned into bluffs. So hands like 9-10, no heart, that can't pull the trigger on the turn, but now has been checked to a third time.
I think that's
It's tough because 9-10 blocks what I'm shooting for.
Like, fine. So let's say you have 9-10 of diamonds, spades, and clubs.
But even make it simpler, because like 9-10 definitely anti-blocks in a bad way. I want to try to fold out 9s and 10s, but like all the the queen jack suiteds that aren't hearts, the king queen suiteds that aren't hearts, these hands are never winning at showdown, and they certainly couldn't barrel the turn.
Those hands just pot the flop, check back. I think those hands just give up. I mean, maybe not, but
I have to have bluffs come from somewhere.
I think you identify that I just like have a bluff catcher.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna play so imbalanced that you're comfortably folding 10s correctly on the river.
There's just like a lot of combinations.
Also, again, my size is a problem, and to be frank, I may have chosen 900 with my bluffs and 600 with my value correctly.
Yeah.
Which is a whole nother
the exploitative split.
Thing. Yeah.
Should we move to the solver?
Yeah, let's take a look at how this would have shaken out at equilibrium. Okay, so if we take a look at what the solve preferred, well, first I guess let me set this whole thing up for you. So if we take a look at what the range construction is for Chris, we gave him about an 11% raise call range.
Gangster.
Yeah. So we're looking at like half combinations of 2s through 5s, a very tiny frequency of queens and kings, very small frequency of ace king suited, about 50% ace queens, about 25% ace jack off, and then the rest is somewhere between like 75 and 100% frequency. A lot of suited broadways, a lot of suited aces, pocket pairs, things of that nature.
I'm not folding that shit.
Sure.
100%.
My 3-bet range, despite being wider by including king 8 suited and king 9 suited at some frequency, still only 7% of hands.
This is your 3-bet?
Yeah. So I gave myself probably tighter of a 3-bet range than I was actually employing in real time. I think maybe discrediting ace jack off.
What's your beef with suited connectors?
I definitely would not have 3-bet suited connectors in this particular spot. Having the high card to me was way more attractive than having like 8 high. If I had suited connectors, if I had pocket pairs, if I had like ace 10 off, these types of hands, maybe not ace 10 off. That might be a bad example. I'd probably just fold that hand. But
I don't want to make this a long discussion. I
Yeah.
want to keep going with the solve. But do you think the game is trending away from 3-betting suited connectors?
not necessarily, and not necessarily at depth. I think that there's still practice to it. It's just that you're dominated a lot more by the suited Broadway hands that continue. And then also the suited aces. I think 3-betting them is much better than flatting them. But
Really?
yeah, because like I mean, in this particular instance, maybe not, because you're opening under the gun, so your range is a little bit tighter. But just in a general case, you don't want to be in single raise pots with them all that often, because a lot of hands are going to dominate you that,
Right.
put you in bad shape. And then you also don't want to be like defending against 3-bets that frequently, because so in this case, had you opened 8-9 suited under the gun, I 3-bet king 8 suited and you defend.
Yeah.
This is a pretty negative event.
Pretty bad for me.
But yeah, I think I would have tried to go into the I'm going to get hood and outplay this kid post with a lot of the suited connector type of holdings, not wanting to blow the pot up with 8 high.
Yeah.
So I gave myself a relatively tight 3-bet range. This is pretty much what equilibrium looks like, just me adding in the king 8 suited. I think I'm a little remiss doing it. I should have had some percentages of offsuit broadways like ace jack, queen jack, king jack.
Did you run the munker on the formation?
Simple preflop.
They do multi-way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It does up to 9-handed. And then also there's the simple 3-way, which can do multi-way post flop.
Damn.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been an interesting product. I wish there was a way for me to kind of test it against other solves, but it's too gray right now.
Yeah.
I could go purchase a bunch of packs and then compare them versus what I run in simple pre. But I don't lean that heavily on it anyway, because in the live realm, it's just so exploitive. Each individual spot is so conditional to the last.
Yeah.
That I don't really. It's just a guideline for me personally. So we ran the flop. The solve does prefer my size. I think. No, I think it was like 80% pot.
350. Oh, are you saying the solver size is 80%? You bet 350.
Did I bet 350?
Into 395?
Oh, yeah. It's not quite pot, right?
I mean, it's more than 80%.
Okay, whatever. Yeah, here I have. Okay, so it's right. I bet 290.6 into 300.
All right.
Or sorry, into 390.
Sure.
Whatever. It's close. So it does prefer this size, as you can see. It's choosing it about half the time. And with my particular candidate, it's choosing it about 40% of the time. So it's pretty much a fair mix. It's going to be checking 15%, I believe.
To clarify, by the way, this interface is it shows all 5 cards, but we are on the flop.
On the flop, right.
Solve.
Yeah, so basically wherever I'm operating down here is the street at which we've calculated. So I've calculated the flop and the turn thus far, and then we will get to the river thereafter. Yeah. But yeah, so essentially King 8 suited is going to be checking back about 17.5% of the time. It's going to choose the large size about 40%, and then it is going to choose the smaller size about 43% of the time. So, pretty even mix. I could be randomizing in this spot, but instead I was kind of like just thinking about the overall scope of my strategy. And as I kind of mentioned, I'm just trying to impart an uncapped range onto your semi-capped range on this texture. So we do go big. You respond through a call, which is a pure call.
So this is my response to your flop bet.
Yep. Pure call scenario. And we are going to land on a turn, 8 of hearts. You have a near pure check. So it's actually leading here about 23% of the time. If we look at the hands that it's choosing to lead, it's mostly the wheel aces, specifically the non-heart ones. So for whatever reason, it likes betting ace 5, no heart. And I imagine that's just where you're going to start pulling some bluffs from. So these are going to be the hands that you're going to lead as bluffs. particularly ace 5 and ace deuce to some degree. And then when we look at the other hands it's going to choose to do this with, it likes betting
Double gutty.
queen 9 of hearts. No, where are you getting double gutty from?
Ace 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh,
4, 5, 6,
I was
7,
saying
8.
like, no, for value, it likes leading queen 9 of hearts, ace 9 of hearts.
I was just saying that the ace 5 is a double gutter.
Yeah. It likes leading a set of 4s. So just some of the higher EV hands, for whatever reason, it particularly likes having the 9 of hearts in range whenever it chooses a lead.
Wouldn't you want to target like 9, 10 of hearts, jack 9 of hearts?
Perhaps, but those are, one combination in my 3-bet range. I think it's more interested in, effectively, I guess taking away, or it doesn't care that much about taking away 9s, but it wants you to have, or wants me to have queens, kings, aces with a heart. Jacks, 10s, queens, kings with a heart specifically.
All right.
So that it can extract value. So it's not leading often. And like I said, the ones that it is leading, not all that intuitive. It's leaning very heavily on the 9 of hearts here, leading 10-9 suited all the way up to ace-9 suited. And then it's pulling its bluffs from its gut shots or double gut shots with no heart. When you check, I am inclined to check here at a pretty high frequency. It does like choosing the small size, as I mentioned, over the large size. It chooses the large size never.
Never.
0%.
So
0.01%.
So it takes ace of hearts, queen, and bets what?
So if we take a look at my betting range, we're pretty much pulling from all. It's not polar. We're pulling from all portions of the range.
Okay.
As you can see in this Manhattan graph. So
we're betting, like jacks.
Jacks is betting a small frequency. It looks like it's betting the ones that don't have the heart more often. Nope, that's not true. It's just mixing. So like jacks of clubs, jack of hearts bets 91%, jack of hearts, jack of diamonds 18%. And then the other two combos that don't have hearts betting 33%. So effectively it's just randomizing when it's choosing a hand like jacks. When we look at a hand like ace king off, let's see if it prioritizes the heart. Yeah. So it's going to prioritize having a heart when it chooses to bet. Both the ace and the king of hearts all bet at a relatively higher frequency. I imagine the same thing's true for ace queen of hearts. Yeah, we can see having a heart lends it to betting at a very high frequency. It never bets whenever it doesn't have a heart.
This is why I said it's really hard to have bluffs.
Well, it doesn't bet these all the time. So if we look at ace queen, it bets the queen of hearts 60% of the time. It bets the ace of hearts 100% of the time. But you're going to be less inclined to bluff on the end whenever you have ace high. If we look at a hand like king queen.
So do you want to revise then we should check an 8 more than a 10 of hearts? If it's betting the ace of hearts, jack, ace of hearts, queen at 100?
Not necessarily. It's not. It's not betting them 100. It's betting the ace of hearts, king of clubs 100%, and then everything else is a gradient scale, all the way down to the king of hearts only betting 33% of the time. King queen off, same thing. It doesn't bet anything 100%. The queen of hearts bets more often than the king of hearts. The king of hearts checks back about 25% of the time, et cetera, et cetera. So you're definitely gonna land on the river with hands that you can pull from your bluffing tree. If we take a look at what king 8 of spades wants to do, it's almost never betting. It's choosing about 20% of the time to bet. So if we look at the checking frequency, I'll be checking back about 80, which I do elect to do. Now we land on the river. Again, you aren't supposed to bet very often. When you do bet, it actually likes an overbet. So no shock, you're going to need higher equity than 10s.
As is custom.
Right.
Through polar bets.
Right. So here we're just going to see our highest EV hands and our lowest EV hands choosing this overbet.
Right.
You're going to lean on some of your wheels to pull the bluffs from. And then you're going to take your full houses and your flushes and you're going to overbet.
Smash.
Yeah. When you do elect to check,
You call an overbet with like queens?
I don't
1,500.
think I can. Because it would have to be queens. No, well, it wouldn't have to be, I guess. Yeah, it's tough. Queens makes me want to call more because it blocks so many more of your potential flushes.
Then aces.
No, aces would make me want to call the most.
Right.
Aces with the ace of
block.
hearts. Aces
By
with the
far
ace of hearts, I would call at the highest frequency.
Yeah.
But I would be more inclined to call queens with the queen of hearts, I think, than kings with the king of hearts. Yeah. So as we can see, the sizing that I wanted to choose, the 6 and change, was greatly preferred over the 900. No real shock there.
Why is that?
I think it's just due to the texture of the board changing twice now. It's very difficult for my uncapped range on the flop to still remain incredibly polar, but I'm more, I guess, like showdown driven than you are in the sense that I have higher showdown value than you do. Not that I possess more showdown value hands, just my hands that I do possess are stronger. So I still have aces, I still have kings, I still have queens, I still have jacks. You might start at like jacks and work your way down. I do have some 8x coverage here, obviously, by the hand that I have. So effectively, we just have like a range that is linear on my side in value versus one that is very bluff catch heavy on your side.
Just capped.
Yeah. Kind of. I mean, relatively speaking, you can still have nut flushes that
that's true.
Don't want to pull out because the board did pair and I could potentially have full houses or quads or whatever. And you can have non-nut flushes that are still, I would say don't really qualify as quote unquote capped. They're really strong hands, but they don't really want to play an all-in pot either.
Right.
So if I had chosen the correct size, we see that your response with tens is relatively mixed, and you should be calling here about half the time. So you should be calling completely with your tens that possess a heart and never with your tens that don't possess a heart. Pretty easy split. When I bet the size that I actually chose, tens now starts folding a lot more frequently. So you are now only calling about 60% of the time when you have the 10 of hearts and nearly never when you don't. So you arrive at the right conclusions with your particular candidate.
I eventually arrive at a fold. I still stand by my reasons. I think it's pretty hard to find that many combinations of hands that take a bluffing line.
Well, it's easy to stand by your reasons when it's quote unquote solver approved. So even if I bet the 600, you're still only supposed to call with your combo like 30%.
Sure.
And if you have any inkling that I'm not bluffing there enough, then for sure, like you get to fold more. And I also ran this in a way where I have a reasonable 3-bet range. If I were to expand it out, now you're going to have to start calling with tens more frequently.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But, it's difficult to say exactly how I'm going to construct each street if I'm quote unquote like losing it. What I can say here in real time is that I would be delaying a lot of my bluffs to river on the specific 8 of hearts. So whatever you intuitively think that I would start to bet on the 8 of hearts, I would probably bet less frequently.
Yeah, I did not recognize that during the hand.
Yeah.
But I arrive at a fold. That is the end of the hand. Got some money back.
Kind of. Sklansky dollars.
Jack Laskey has put out a new course, Mastering Exploits. Not that new, like a week ago, right? While we were in Austin.
Yeah.
On Solve For Why. SolveForWhy.io. SolveForWhy.io. We couldn't get the .com because somebody snatched it up. How much do they want for it?
Initially 170,000. And I told them, no, thank you. And I was positive that it was Polk who parked it. Only to come find out that it was some like
That would have
business.
That would have been pretty sharp of him.
It would have been
Scoop that
funny.
up.
It would have been funny. But it got scooped up like before, like way back in 2014 or something like that. It's just been parked ever since.
It could have been good for content too, like a whole rivalry.
Yeah.
He's got the domain name.
But yeah, then eventually like they gave us a counter to their I'm not budging offer, and they said we'll do it for 45K.
Go fuck yourself.
I said lose at 0 and we'll start talking.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I don't care that much. It's 2020.
We have a Slack channel like Discord, but I feel like we should hype that a bit more.
Yeah. If you guys want to join the Slack community, we'll discuss these type of hands and others. There are a lot of great people who have been through the academy willing to share their resources and their experiences. We'll put a link for that in the description below. We'll also put a link for if you enjoy the simple products that we've been using here as Solve, we can offer, I believe it's a 10% discount using the affiliate link below, so you can get any of the simple products. And then, yeah, check out tv.solveforwhy.io for any courses or other Poker Out Loud stuff that you would like to see in the future.
That's it.
It's a wrap.